populations will disappear if we're unable to fix it. That is a mathematical certainty. And it's going to happen a lot more quickly than many people think. I mean, within a century, if our generational size in Norway is just 30% of what it is now, that's going to lead to a lot of big changes, and it's going to be extremely destabilizing. And we don't know how it's going to play out with a shrinking or collapsing populations, and we don't know how to incentivize people to make more children. Men have had imposed on them a stronger and stronger and stronger competition. And as we know from other aspects of human activities, the stronger the competition doesn't mean that we get a more equal outcome. It's the opposite. You get a higher stratification. So what we've seen in this century, according to some studies, is that more and more mating opportunities are going to the top 5% and the top 20% of men. As far as we know, we're the only intelligent life, or even life at all, in the universe. And from that perspective, you could say, well, if we're the only show in town in this vast, infinite universe, if we're the only life that can appreciate it, then I would say we have a tremendous responsibility for keep reproducing and keep furthering the human project and reach for the stars. In the not too far future, we can be entering a golden age, not only of humanity, but reproduction. Because if your life is materially secured and you have unlimited access to robot nannies who are great, so much better with kids than what humans could be, although, well, we'll learn what is the difference between humans and robots. What is it we as humans can provide for children that robots can't? I'd like the answer to that to be a lot, that robots can never compete with our fatherly and motherly love. But I'm not utterly convinced.
That you have stories of love from Vikings to Tinder sort of explores the evolutionary mating ideologies. What led you to write this book? Was there a particular moment or trend that made you go, hey, this needs to be looked into?
Well, it started a long time ago, more than 20 years ago, more than 25 years ago. First, I used to be a novelist in the 2000s, so I published several books on this topic then, and then I wanted to, at some later point, investigate this from a scholarly perspective. So I needed to acquire the necessary tools and insights and knowledge that would allow me to dig deeper into it. Because I noticed in the late 90s that strange things were happening. Dating was becoming very dysfunctional, both for most men and women. And I naively thought if I wrote novels, which were very successful, and alerted people to how things were, we would change, because we would want win-win outcomes, not lose-lose outcomes. But I was young and naive, and that didn't happen. So I wanted to understand, how did we end up where we are today? So I needed to go back in history. I didn't know how far we needed to go back, but the answer was 800 years. That's when this process started. And then to investigate how these 800 years have been and what kind of transitions we've gone through, what kind of ideologies we've had, what kind of mating regimes, you need to look at the literature. That's kind of the best sources we have for it, because one of the important functions of literature is to impart on children and everyone how we do mating in our society. And you shouldn't ask questions about that, because it's a lot of there are many lies and imaginations and things we tell people, and that's just how it has to be. We've moved so far from our original mating environment that to make people take upon themselves the burdens of pair bonding for decades and taking care of offspring, we need to put some pressure on them, and we need to tell them some things that aren't necessarily true. And you shouldn't ask questions about that, because nothing is more important for society than mating. If you don't reproduce, you simply disappear. It's not relative. It's the only iron law. One of the few iron laws of evolution. But when we are in a situation like we are now, and we've been in similar situations before, our mating regime no longer works, we can't afford not to question our norms and values with regard to mating. We have to investigate what it is we're doing, how we got here, what we're doing wrong, and what our plausible options are for the future. What direction may we take this in that allows us to survive also in the future? Because if with a low replacement level mating, we will disappear. It's just a question of how fast. And with the Norwegian fertility rate now of 1.4, it means we'll lose a third of the generational size per generation. So in just 3 generations, we've lost 70% of the children. So and that's if we stay at this level. With Korea's fertility rate of 0.7, it means that in 3 generations, their generational size will be reduced by 96%. And then in the next generation, it's down to, they just have 1% of the children left. So it means we will disappear. And now the question is, Do we want to exist? And if we do, what might we do that can get fertility rate up again so that our society survive in the long term?
Well, that's kind of scary. From the Korean perspective, but going back to sort of understanding what was the original way of mating. Once you started your work, what led you to reach a certain point in history that made you notice, hey, this is the original way of mating?
Yeah, well, in the Norwegian context, the pivotal year, symbolically and literally, is 1226. So we used to, since the introduction of agriculture, live in very tight-knit kin groups. And we did that for thousands of years in Scandinavia. We had done that for 5,000 years. And then the West did something very unique that hasn't happened in human history before, and this was spearheaded by the church. They dissolved Europe's tribes. We used to live in tribes, and then they dissolved those tribes and made us live in nuclear families. And instead of living in polygynous kinship societies, we now lived in feudal societies underpinned by lifelong monogamy. And that set us on a process of ever greater individualism and ever greater female emancipation. So we became very individualistic people, and women became more and more free. And that is what has brought us to where we are today. So we've had three sexual revolutions in the West. The first was around the year 1200 with this transition from kinship societies of polygyny to feudal societies with lifelong marriage. And then the second sexual revolution was around 1750 when we tried to become the first societies in human history with individual choice, because we've always had arranged marriage. And the more individualistic we become, the more we wanted to choose our own partner. So we tried that in the 18th century, and it went very poorly. The proportion of illegitimate children skyrocketed across Northwestern Europe, double, triple, quadrupled. So women, when they could make their own choices instead of having their family and community assign them or influence them towards a particular partner with a similar value as them, they could now choose the men they desired the most. So they went for the most attractive men, and these men promised, yes, I love you, if you have sex and you become pregnant, then I will marry you. And then when the woman became pregnant, many of these men left, and this had disastrous consequences for women. So we couldn't universalize this individual choice on long and short-term markets, meaning relationships and casual sex, until the third sexual revolution of the 1960s, because then we become prosperous enough to be able to afford breakups, and birth control allowed us to detach copulation from reproduction. So we now have the first societies in human history with free women who can choose their own partners. And that is what has put us in the situation we are now. We've only done half the job. So Norway has been spearheading this feminist movement for 150 years, female freedom, female empowerment on so many levels. And it's, from my perspective, being from a Nordic culture, this has been fantastic. Very big fan of free women. And I like these societies we've created. But we've only done half the job, because with any big cultural change, if it sabotages reproduction, it simply will not survive. We won't survive. So now we've created societies with the first free women in human history. And now we have to find a way to combine that with sufficient reproduction, or we will disappear, and then the world will be taken over by those societies that have a very different view on free women. Generally, the societies that are still reproducing at replacement level or higher are Africa, the Middle East, and a few countries further east. And women do not have the same opportunities there as they have in Norway and Mexico. So it's a question of whether we want to have, not just a question of our society's survival, it's a question of whether we want a future where human females can be free from a Western liberal perspective.
What are the main differences that separate those kinds of cultures, if we consider, for example, Norwegian to a Mexican one?
A Mexican one or a Norwegian to those cultures that have reproduction?
What is the main difference and component that makes one be more productive versus now one that is not as productive?
Productive in terms of creating babies?
Yes.
Mexico is not doing that great in terms of fertility. Mexico is also below fertility. You're going in the same direction as the rest of the modern world. You also have free women who can make their own choices. So
that has been changing over the years. I can see that.
Yeah.
What has been the shift that those societies are sort of taking that it's leading them into that direction?
Men are no longer good enough. So the attraction that... So we're going to have to go further back than 800 years to understand this, to understand our human mating nature and what the difference is between male and female mating psychology. So 6 million years ago, when we go back to the last common ancestor we had with chimpanzees and bonobos, we mated promiscuously. This is what almost all animals do. More than 90% of mammals mate promiscuously. That means that men, or I'm going to say men instead of males, just to make it simpler. Only humans are men, but let's call them men. Men compete for status, and those who do best, those that succeed in whatever society or your troop consists of, they are the ones who predominantly get the mating opportunities. So the women channel mating opportunities to the most successful males, because that is the most effective way of spreading to the population the most functional genes in a certain environment. The downside to it is that those men will spend so many resources competing for mating opportunities, resources that could be spent more productively. Because when you have a pair bonding society that we evolved to become, we became a pair bonding species around 4 million years ago, those men can invest in their partner, in their offspring. It's just a more productive use of male resources, at least in those cases that pair bonding is beneficial. So 6 million years ago, that's when we had this promiscuous attraction system, which means that men generally desire to mate with almost all women. Perhaps today, most men want to have sex with most women, but women only want to have sex with a very small proportion of men. Because in a promiscuous mating regime, men only their minimal parental investment is sex and sperm, while the woman risks becoming pregnant, having to go through that period, which is very costly, and then she's stuck with the offspring afterwards because the man does not contribute to it generally. So that's the original. That's our promiscuous attraction system. Men having a very generous attraction toward many women, and women being very discriminatory towards who she's willing to have, who she wants to have promiscuous sex with. But then humans became more and more, our offspring became more and more demanding, our heads grew, our developmental period doubled over 4 million years. So it became a beneficial strategy to get paternal investment, to have the man contribute to the child. Calories, protection, etc. And this evolved around 4 million years ago. So we developed a second attraction system, a pair bonding attraction system. And here men and women are fairly alike, because we ended up with a monogamous norm. We're also polygynous species, so most human societies have had a certain level of polygyny also, but it's this attraction pair bonding where a man and a woman fall in love and then give each other sexual exclusivity most of the time. And then the man will then contribute with resources to the woman and the child. So then she can fall in love with a man of any mate value, or typically someone of similar mate value as her. That's how people pair bond. But we never became a complete pair bonding species. We have both of these attraction systems, the promiscuous one and the pair bonding one. And my hypothesis is that for every human society that has existed, it's been a foundational challenge to find a way to reconcile the differences between women's promiscuous and pair bonding attraction system, because women will typically be drawn primarily to the most attractive men, and then you need some kind of culture that distributes partner. Otherwise, those men will typically be incentivized to have sex with many women and leave them with the offspring to care for it alone, instead of instead of being in a committed relationship. So this is what has happened now when we in the 1960s got the first free women that could make these own choices. And we have to remember that for the 2 million years that we've been a part of the genus Homo, that we've been humans, we've been Homo sapiens for shorter, but we've been humans for 2 million years approximately. Women never had a chance to evolve those traits and skills that would allow them to make their own choices more productively. It was always a tension between what the woman wanted and what her parents or community wanted. So women seem to have evolved an exaggerated attraction to good genes, meaning particularly attractive men, and then not having evolved also the ability to see through men's deceptive strategies to assess her own mate value appropriately and to make those choices that make it a more likely outcome that she ends up pair bonding. Because most humans want to end up in a pair bond. We enjoy promiscuous sex term. We have incredible flexibility as a species, but most people want a partner. So what we're seeing now, and it's become particularly obvious through dating apps like Tinder, is that women channel an extraordinary amount of their dating effort to the very most attractive men. So if you look at the top 1%, top 5%, top 10% on Tinder, they get enormous attention and mating opportunities, while the bottom 80-90% receive very little. And this is why me and a colleague, we introduced the term involuntary single women, which seems to be a growing phenomenon where women can then spend 5, 10, 15 years of their 20s and 30s dating and having sex with very attractive men from Tinder, and then being very frustrated and increasingly traumatized because none of these men want to commit to a relationship. And that is, let's say, these men that are most active and get most of these mating opportunities, let's say they have a mate value from 95 and up. And if you're a woman with a mate value of 70, you have unlimited access to dating and sex with highly attractive men. But because we as a species mate assortatively, that means with somebody with a similar mate value, all that dating effort is highly unlikely to end up with a relationship. And there are several reasons for this. One is that women have the power on this market. Because men's promiscuous attraction system is so generous, men, according to one study, Norwegian men would like 25 sex partners in a lifetime. Norwegian women would like 5. So there's just such a much larger demand for female sexuality than there is supply that women have the power on that market. And then in addition, you have the fact that women are predominantly drawn to, let's say, the top few percentiles of men, because that's what their promiscuous attraction system draws them to, and that's very immediate. So they have the power to choose only the most attractive men, and those are the men they are drawn to promiscuously. So those are the dynamics of the dating market that makes. So one of the main drivers of low fertility is that women can't find a partner, or they find them too late. So Norwegian women want 2.4 children, they end up having 1.4. And it's also a fact that men generally have become less worth to them, because for 4 million years ago, when the pair bonding attraction system evolved, the function of that was for men to get access to female sexuality and for women to get access to men's resources. And in today's modern world, women can make their own money. In a welfare state like Norway, women get transferred more than $1.2 million more from the welfare state than they pay in taxes, while men pay more in taxes. So women get access to men's resources without having to have sex with them or be in a relationship with them, and they can also make their own money. And we see this from studies universally, that the more equality you have in a society, the freer women you have, the more they exclude the lowest value men from their pool of potential partners. So they will raise their standards because they don't need a man anymore. In the environments that were before, they were impoverished. As a woman, having a man was generally very helpful, economically, for protection, for moral reasons, because your culture pressured it to you. And now that women are completely free, many of them conclude that they can have excellent lives as singles, or at least fairly good ones, so they're not willing to settle for men that have lower partner value. And that's the main driver of the situation we are today. We have created a society in which men are, with an increasing number of men, aren't good enough for women, and that means that fewer and fewer women will have partners with whom they can have a child.
That's very interesting. I want to take apart a few key points that you mentioned there. So perhaps the first one is, obviously us men, we're not good enough for women. How much of that is from the perspective that society is changing in a way that, I don't know if it's correct to argue that it seems to me that things are more beneficial for women than it is for men, or there's like a preference towards, let's say, if we think about the universities. I'm in Finland, and I see that there's a disproportionate level of females versus males in universities, and the same goes for in the job market. Approximately for every 100 applications sent, 60 females are being invited to job interviews, whereas 40 are being invited towards male. So I definitely understand that perhaps as men, we do need to step up. But how much of it have you noticed is self-inflicted from a man's point of view versus society created?
It's entirely society created, from my perspective. I'm an evolutionary scholar, so I don't see humans as autonomous individuals using reason to practice free will. That is the modern Western myth. The way I see humans, like you as an individual can make your own choices, but as a group, we're very predictable. So we respond to incentives in the environment. Men have a certain male mating psychology. Women have a female mating psychology. Of course, between individuals, there are great differences, but there are sex differences that are very influential. And these psychologies will play out differently in different environments. So from a modern Western perspective, we are very primed to say, well, Daniel, you have to pull yourself together. You have to start showering, and you have to start listening to women, and you have to have a better Tinder profile. On an individual level, that might be good advice. On a societal level, it's terrible advice. What it means is that I'm telling you to compete harder. And that's what happened, particularly after this, since the 1960s, the third sexual revolution. Men have had imposed on them a stronger and stronger and stronger competition. And as we know from other aspects of human activities, the stronger the competition doesn't mean that we get a more equal outcome. It's the opposite. You get a higher stratification. So what we've seen in this century, according to some studies, is that more and more mating opportunities are going to the top 5% and the top 20% of men. And there's an equivalent reduction for the bottom 80% of men. So the harder this competition becomes, you will have much more spoils for the few winners and more marginalizations for the men at the bottom. And the men at the bottom are the bottom 80%. So telling men to pull themselves together and compete harder may be a good advice for an individual if you have a buddy who's struggling, but on a societal level, that will likely only make things worse. You can see now, for instance, studies indicate that for the median man, the guy in the middle, statistically, for him to get a mating opportunity through Tinder, he would have to work himself through 30,000 profiles. And that's
30,000.
That's rather dystopic. And I mean, for half of the male population, it's even worse. So I was interviewed a few months ago with regard to a Norwegian who had worked himself through hundreds of thousands of Tinder profiles without success. And he was wondering, what am I supposed to do? What are women expecting of me? There's nothing you really can do. There's nothing women expecting of you. It's just that women are, because they are free and empowered, which I'm 100% supportive of, and I want to solve this fertility crisis because I want there to be free women in the future also. But the emancipation of women in this regard requires a marginalization of low-value men. The regime we had from the first to the third sexual revolution in the West, from the 1200s to the 18th century, that was a uniquely egalitarian regime. All through human history, men generally has not been able to depend upon entering into a pair bond and becoming a father. We have we have double as many, or around twice as many female ancestors as male ancestors. Perhaps 80% of women who reach adulthood reproduced, while perhaps only 40% of men. So we've always had this stratification. But before the first sexual revolution, mating opportunities was distributed based on which men did well in patriarchal status games. And then when the church imposed on everyone, even the most powerful of men, that they could only have one woman in their life, then suddenly all men had an opportunity. Almost all men had an opportunity to mate and reproduce. And this created a unique egalitarian regime that peaked in the 1950s when, according to one source, almost everyone in the West married, and they did so early, and they reproduced, and those who could afford it managed their relationship with the breadwinner housewife model. And then when this opened up, divorces skyrocketed, pair bonding plummeted, the single rate just keeps increasing. And we now have a similar stratification as we had before the first sexual revolution, but this is no longer determined primarily by men's status battles, but by female mate preferences. So while before you could hoard tens or hundreds or some even thousands of women. If you were a very powerful man, a great warrior, a bigly somebody who could accumulate resources, didn't really matter that much if the women wanted you or not, that you just had that patriarchal power. Now, it's to a very large degree about how hot you are and how effectively you can communicate your attraction through Tinder. So now it's mating markets used to be governed by patriarchs. Now they're governed by all women through their mate preferences. But the result is similar in terms of stratification between men. So yeah, men didn't used to be able to rely on becoming a father, and now again we see that in an increasing extent.
Okay, so from the man's point of view, let's say that 80% of the bottom 80% that are struggling to find a mate, what advice can we give to them? Let's say it seems to me that obviously dating applications have sort of magnified the problem that we have, right? Because it's perhaps preventing men to actually go out in the world, at a cafe, at a gym, at a library, to actually approach women. So we are constantly creating a society where they have to use dating apps to meet people. So if we were to put the dating apps to the side, what is the one thing that bottom 80% need to know so that we can start shifting this problem that we're creating?
Well, one thing is this move online that dating apps and social media and smartphones have created. But what Tinder also does is that it allows women so much more effectively to discriminate men. So say before 2010, women still had those same promiscuous impulses only toward the very most attractive men, but those most attractive men were hard to access, or at least harder to access for many women. So let's say if you're in a bar, there's men and women there, then those most attractive men could typically only pursue one woman and leave with her. What happens now is that all women have unlimited access to much more attractive men through these apps, because men can now put these women in a queue, in a sense, and then just deal with them one after one after one. So it's just empowered women to live out their mate preferences on the short-term market, but then to the detriment of their opportunities for securing a pair bond, a long-term pair bond. So that is one of the effects of Tinder. It's just, so there's really not much men can do. I mean, women could become more aware of them, but then it's really difficult for them too. It's so easy to select on hotness. So a woman, the median, the average woman on Tinder, according to some studies, the first thing she does is eliminate 95% of men, just delete them from the reality of her mating. So let's say if she has a mate value again of 70, she can delete the bottom 95% and never see them again. And then once she has swiped right on 5% of men, the next filtration she does before she meets any of them is to eliminate 98%. And out of those men she meets, before she offers a mating opportunity, she eliminates another 80%. So if you're an average woman and your dating strategy is Tinder to begin with probably consists of above average hot men, because if you're not hot, it's gonna be painful. It really reduces men's self-esteem, and then many escape from those apps because it hurts so much. So it's already not a representative population there. And then by filtrating 95%, then 98%, and then 80%, the guy that you have selected, the chance that he's gonna be interested in pair bonding with you as a woman of average mate value, it's just really low. But it's easy. It's easy to select on hotness and the social skills you see in the next level, and then that chemistry in the third phase. What would you as a woman do? I'm asking you now, Daniel. If you are a woman on Tinder and you have the opportunity to perform a selection that leaves you with a man that is 1 out of 5,000, easy to select. You go hotness, ability to write and communicate, and then chemistry. What else would you select for in that beginning, considering the extraordinary amount, the thousands of men that are bothering you and pestering you and wanting to meet you and wanting to chat with you? If you're not going to select for hotness, how would you select for someone with whom it's likely that you can become coupled with?
Financial status.
Yeah, but if you're an average woman and you select a man with high financial status, his mate value is going to be so much higher than you. He's going to be interested in having sex with you, probably, but it's unlikely that he's going to want to be your boyfriend. How would you, as a woman with a mate value of 70, orient yourself to find a man with a similar mate value that is likely to fall in love with you and that you're likely to fall in love with him so you can pair bond? Because it has to do with chemistry, compatibility. How do you find those men? How do you end up on dates with men that are likely to become your boyfriend instead of just a one-night stand? It's really, really hard to these apps.
It's really hard because then I suppose at that point, the expectations of men as well that are looking for a woman are not aligned with the same things that a woman is perhaps looking for. I mean, usually men are looking for hotness. Perhaps women are looking for hotness as well, but also maybe financial status and so forth. So it seems like there might be like a imbalance of traits that each and every one is looking for, and they're never going to find it because they're just, both of them are perhaps looking too high.
Well, there's also something that we refer to in my field as sexual conflict theory. There are inherent conflicts between men and women. One of them is access to female sexuality. Like I mentioned earlier, men in Norway would generally like 25 sex partners in their life. Women would only want 5. A man will generally be incentivized to always try to get a woman to bed because very few men get to have 25 sex partners in their life. So men are always at a deficit. So research also shows that men are willing to lie to women and exaggerate their intentions and emotions just to get her to bed. So when a woman, no matter who a woman, almost no matter whom she chooses from Tinder and Amsterdam, that man is going to be incentivized to have sex with her. And if he is smashingly hot and he can trigger a promiscuous attraction system, she could benefit from that and want to do that. But when women over years after years after year just experience that these men that they date, they're available for dating and sex, but not relationships, that over time for some women creates a trauma and a hesitancy and a distrust of men. So, and then as many women have told me that I've seen in debates about this, women are now starting to understand that, yes, they can get sexual access to the very most attractive men, but then those men won't be interested in being their boyfriend. So they're trying to select men on Tinder that they think have lower mate value, more similar mate values to themselves, hoping that these men will be interested in a relationship. But these men that have then been marginalized sexually all their life and have had very few sex partners, even if they're not interested in a relationship with this woman because the chemistry is not there or because she has lower mate value than them, they will still be incentivized to have sex with her. And many women feel that this is highly inappropriate, that even low-value men will do so much to have sex and signal false intentions just to get a woman to bed. So we have this mating market that is marginalizes the vast, vast majority of men, but also creates a situation for the women who have the power that isn't beneficial to them. You could argue that this is a wonderful mating market for high-value men at the top of getting many sex partners. There are ways you could say that maybe that's not as healthy. That's not as healthy as it seems for them either, but that's a different discussion. So we just have a situation now where we opened up these markets. Suddenly we ended up with this technology that's greatly amplified the dysfunctions. Fertility rates are plummeting. Men are depressed. I mean, among incels, the most marginalized men, according to one study, more than 80% of them thought about killing themselves. Women can't find the boyfriends they want and start reproducing. So like I mentioned, women want 2.4 children in Norway, end up at 1.4. And yeah, we've created a mating regime now that is leading us towards self-eradication. So our populations will disappear if we're unable to fix it. That is a mathematical certainty. And it's going to happen a lot more quickly than many people think. I mean, within a century, if our generational size in Norway is just 30% of what it is now, that's going to lead to a lot of big changes, and it's going to be extremely destabilizing. And we don't know how it's going to play out with the shrinking or collapsing populations, and we don't know how to get how to incentivize people to make more children. This is a very unique situation we are in now in human history. We've struggled with low fertility before, but never like this. This is global. And it's it's not entirely good. Like I mentioned, there are still some countries where women aren't as free, where more reproduction. So the question is, how can we have free women who want to reproduce? How do we need to change our societies for women to feel like, yeah, I want to have 2-3 children. I want to start doing it when I'm young. How can we create a society where women with three children have as good as or better lives than single women in many regards? How can we help women feel materially safe? How can we help women get partners if they do want that? And how can we help women have children without having partners? How can we create local environments, security, materially and socially, opportunities to not lose those parts of life that young women appreciate, that you lose today if you are in a relationship and you have children, or if you're a single mom. And I think, at least in Norway, I would advocate that feminism put us in this situation, and I think feminism will have to be the solution to get out of it. I don't think we can start backtracking. Some countries are making it harder to have abortions, trying to incentivize women financially to go back to the housewife role. I think, at least not in Norway, that's an option. And I think we need to start experimenting to create a society in which more women will choose to have more children, because that doesn't impede on their individualistic desires and what they consider to be the good life. And how we're going to do that we would need to experiment and see. And I would love for more women to involve in this. Women generally avoid this debate because it's kind of uncomfortable, and some of them fear that a discussion about this could hinder their freedoms, could make people suggest that women need to return to the kitchen. But if we're going to fix this, we have to have this discussion. I would love women to get more involved and tell us what it is they need in society to feel safe to have children. Otherwise, we won't have free women in the future, or at least that's a significant risk.
Yeah, well, I think there's room for both. I mean, if I think of myself, my wife is Finnish. No, we're married. We have 2 kids. We both work. We both, are pursuing the things that we want. So if we're thinking about a solution of how we can change those things to happen within our society, especially within the Nordic region, what is the role of parents, for example? I think a lot of the ideology, a lot of the things that young people get or believe now are based as well as to what is the environment that they see at home. So obviously, from the liberation of women, I suppose there has been an increase. I mean, I look at the numbers from, for example, Finland has a high rate of divorce rate. So they already see that perhaps my mother's living by herself, raising, kids as a single mother. And that also sets a precedent that, okay, it's not necessarily for me as a woman to have a man. I can just get married. If it doesn't work out, we just get a divorce, and then I raise him by myself. So what is the role of parenting in these kind of scenarios, in this kind of problem?
Yeah, so there are many directions we can go to try to solve this reproductive crisis. One of the obvious one is, like you're talking about, strengthen the family, try to make people divorce less, take different roles, emphasize the importance of reproduction. I don't think that would be an effective solution for the Nordic countries. We're the most feminist societies that ever existed. I don't think we can or want to go in that direction. I think we should make it easier for couples to have children. But I believe that we are in a situation now where the fact is that more and more men will be perceived to not be good enough for women, so that more and more women will be single. So yes, it's a good idea for those who want to go in a more conservative direction, give them incentives to have a more traditional model. But I don't think, especially in the Nordic countries, that you will get enough bang for those bucks. I think because men are becoming increasingly unsuitable for women from the way women perceive them, we need to create a model in the future where women feel more empowered and safe if they go ahead and have children on their own. And perhaps we need to incentivize models that allow them to share high-value men to a different extent, if that is what they want. If we need perhaps we should go back to a return to some kind of polygyny, but then a matriarchally organized polygyny, The way it is, especially in the Nordic countries now, is that women do share the highest value men, but in temporal succession. So a high value man will have a woman in his youth that he will have a few children with, then he will leave her for a younger woman and have children with her. And then if he feels like it, maybe as he goes to the third woman, maybe he'll reproduce again with her. So they'll go like 2, 3, some maybe 4 rounds, but that's unusual. That breaks up the families. If women want, maybe want to create social structures and apartments and create a world in which women can share these high value men, so that they don't have to break up their families when he starts reproducing with somebody else. That is one way of looking at it.
So in a way, going to a more modern Viking.
Well, the difference would be that the polygynous societies of the past were generally very bad news for women. Women were reduced to commodities being traded between powerful men. Now, I would expect that in the Nordic countries, we would let the power women, for instance, as a female friend of mine suggested, we need to start thinking about architecture. Let's say that we guarantee a woman's material security if she has 3 children, and we build apartment buildings that are made for creating stable environments over decades for women with children. So as a woman, you can move in there before you give birth, and you can live there with a community of other women that are central, or it's a matriarchal structure. And then if you have a boyfriend, as you typically have in the beginning when you have children, he can move in there and live with you. And when that relationship ends, he has to move out. And on these premises, there will be a 24/7 daycare, kindergarten. Well, it will be night care too then. So that if the woman wants to party or sleep around or go travel or do other things that single woman can do, there's always someone there that can take care of her children. And there should also be she won't have to work if she doesn't want to. She'll be materially secured through the government in terms of transfers, subsidies, etc. So we can have a system in place that centers on the reproducing woman and her children, and then the men can come and go into these structures. But it's the power and the security lies with the women, because women are the ones having children. They're the ones who have to be motivated. And that means a further marginalization of men. That is perhaps preferable because the option is non-existence.
Okay, now, if we think about it from the government point of view in terms of how those women are going to be supported whenever they get off from work, like you mentioned, it means that you have to have a pretty robust workforce that is able to pay a lot of taxes so that we can support all these services and systems. But that necessarily is not, we're not going to get there if the population is declining and therefore the workforce is declining, right? So that sounds very interesting and that sounds very promising, but yet again, it is going to lead to a point. I mean, that would be perhaps the best case scenario, given that we would have a sufficient workforce. I mean, obviously in Norway is very different than it is from Finland, but like here in Finland, we already see that the government's making a lot of tax cuts on many things. So that eventually is going to lead to maybe less social services and whatnot. So that suggestion that your friend made, do you see that actually becoming a reality if there's a system put in place that we can guarantee the continuous increase of birth rate?
Yeah. In a technologically static world, the problems that you outline would be very big hindrances. We do not live in a technological static world. Not only do we live in a world of technological transformation, but we are currently in what is referred to as the fourth industrial revolution, which will bring about the greatest change to human societies in human history. The world we will live in 10, 20 years from now will be dramatically different from the one we live in now. Perhaps the greatest disruptor will be the Optimus robot and similar humanoid robots who can do the work that humans do increasingly better than us, and they can work 24 hours a day. So Elon Musk has estimated that by 2040, he will have created somewhere between 10 and 30, 40 billion robots. So we're entering into a future of AI and automation that means that we will increasingly be able to shift our activities as humans, not to securing our own material foundation, but to create wonderful lives for ourselves and others. And I propose, as we phase this in, so in Norway, the way we would do this, we would start experimenting with it now, which we can more than afford, because like I mentioned, we're already transfer more than $1.2 million to each woman, and we could increase that number and tax men more. in the short to medium term. But then as the benefits of AI and automation manifest, we have to create a new society in which people do other things than they have before. And in that situation, we need to think about what kind of society are we going to build in 2030s and 2040s that motivates women to have enough children. And within not too many decades, we will probably also have artificial wombs that will allow us to make this a more gender equal thing, where also men can choose to have children and receive the same benefits and privileges that women would receive under the system, but earlier. So we have to take that into account. The societies we will live in 20 years from now will be so dramatically different that they will have opportunities that we can hardly dream of today. And I think that as we move through these 2020s and 2030s, one of our, perhaps the most important consideration, I mean, in the long term, it's obviously the most important consideration, is how will we able to reproduce our populations in the societies that we will be creating as we move ahead.
Those changes that you mentioned, what do those mean for the bottom 80% of men that are struggling?
Probably, in the beginning, that will be terrible news. The reason why we have nation states and keep low-value men and problematic individuals within the fold is that we need bodies for production and protection. We need workers and soldiers. When this is taken care of by machines, I think we're going to form different types of societies. We won't be incentivized to be in these large nation-state structures. I think we'll live in smaller self-chosen societies where material security and other types of security and organization is provided by the AI, and then our efforts will go into creating wonderful societies. And then one impulse will be then for women to just choose not even to associate. I mean, today women can eliminate 95% of men on Tinder. Maybe they would like to do that in society too. But then on the other hand, for 4 million years, we've been a pair bonding species. We like that intimate connection to one person over several years. So maybe women would still be incentivized to associate with low-value men in hopes of falling in love with one and thus acquiring a partner. So there are different factors there. Then there's going to be sex and love robots for both men and women. So you could imagine that men and because if bad things happen if low-value men get more and more marginalized, more and more women also end up involuntarily single. So it's not good for anyone. It's just that women have the powers from these markets. So if anything were to change, you would say from a modern perspective that they would have to do it because they have the power and agency. Although I don't believe that is possible on a group level. You have to change environment and incentives. But yeah, you could think that as we become more and more individualistic and also narcissistic to some extent, we're just not going to put up with each other's shit. We're going to want a boyfriend or a girlfriend that's a smoking hot, intelligent robot that tells us what feels the best and can confirm us. And yeah, and we don't have to bother with other people's idiosyncrasies. Maybe we do. I don't know. It's an incredibly exciting time. But this is, I mean, mating and societal changes are so intertwined. People don't think about it. People just take mating for granted and think there's some kind of natural mating and then something changed. But I mean, how we conduct our mating is the foundation for every society. All the other structures build on top of that. And we're now moving from the modern humanistic liberal world that you could say, in one sense originated, let's say around 1200 with the first sexual revolution, and then became humanistic about half a millennium ago, and then modernity came, and now we're going into something that is fundamentally different. This is, like I said, the perhaps deepest change in human history. And in those changes, what is most fundamental is how we reorganize our mating, and then everything else builds on top of that. So this is a very important choice, and different communities will choose differently. So I think we're going to see a lot of experimentation. Some of it will be disastrous. Hopefully, a few of them will work really well and also be exportable to other communities. So we're going to use our Norwegian cultural legacy As we make our choices in Mexico, we'll build on its legacy to choose differently. And we just need to bear in mind as we go through these decades that we need to get the mating right. I mean, it's we need to reproduce. Maybe we're just going to leave it to the robots and the AI. Maybe they're going to take care of the artificial wombs and grow children and raise them by robots and send them out in the world. Maybe we individualistic, selfish people just can't be bothered to take care of these children. No, I don't think so. I think people love children. I think it gives a lot of meaning. And so my guess would be that in the not too far future, we could be entering a golden age, not only of humanity, but reproduction. Because if your life is materially secured and you have unlimited access to robot nannies who are great, so much better with kids than what humans could be, although, well, we'll learn what is the difference between humans and robots. What is it we as humans can provide for children that robots can't? I'd like that the answer to that to be a lot, that robots can never compete with our fatherly and motherly love. But I'm not utterly convinced. But we just need to bear in mind as we move forward, and we should start experimenting already now, is to find those social structures and build those communities that motivate people to have enough children so that we can exist in the future as well.
Yeah, in a way, I mean, you tell me all these things. I'm just picturing myself. I'm just picturing and imagining a novel by Isaac Asimov, and it's a bit scary in a way. But so,
how many children would you have? If you're materially secured, you can have size of house doesn't matter, transport, everything. Everything is taken care of with all the nannies you need. How many children would you like to have? What kind of genetic legacy would you like to leave back? Wouldn't you want to have 10 children or 15 children?
At least.
Yeah. So I think
at least
once we have 30 billion Optimus robots in the world and people, their material future is secured, I think people are going to want to reproduce. But maybe I'm too optimistic. Yeah, maybe we'll just have a big. Maybe Donald Trump will start a big world war and we won't get there. But I think at least what's happening now. Well, that is we're not going to get political, but that is what's happening in the U.S. now. This is this pivot that is changing now. They're breaking with the old system and they're trying those tech bros. They're trying to lay the foundation so that technologies they're developing can create a much better world. Now, whether Trump and his team will succeed with that or not is a different question, but they have now created a position for themselves where they have the opportunity to make tremendous changes that can lead to phenomenal good. And it can also go really poorly. But yeah, so in that, we just need to bear in mind that we need to think about mating. We need to think about what society we can make to have children in the future, because without children, there won't be grown-ups in the long run.
No, absolutely not. What has been the initial reaction to these kinds of findings that you have had?
Well, what's cool about Finland is that you guys, 3 years ahead of us, a colleague of mine from Finland has explained this to me, that when I was able to trigger this debate in Norway this summer. So this was a pretty fierce debate for about half a year, or, well, yeah, around that. And before that, the researchers, the fertility researchers, they tried for years to bring this on the agenda, but for political reasons, they had convinced themselves that they couldn't portray this negatively, because if you portray a low fertility rate as something negative, then that can empower right-wing politicians who want to take freedoms away from women. So they're in this situation where the fertility rate plummeted from 2.0 to 1.5 in a decade, and they can't sound the alarm because they would think that the political consequences could be adverse. So they couldn't. So how do you do that? How do you go out to population and say, our fertility rate is plummeting? It's great. I mean, the Norway's leading fertility researcher published a book in 2022 that was titled Decline and Prosper, where he said, so he's warning against fertility and showing how it's plummeting across the world, but at the same time saying, we must not only embrace it, we must celebrate low fertility. It's just the cognitive dissonance of that. He's a brilliant guy. He's a great guy. It's just ideologically, he can't get himself to say that this is negative. He has to say that we have to celebrate it. So yeah, the debate just never started. And this summer, when I published the article I mentioned earlier with a colleague, where we launched the INSING concept. By the way, to your viewers, the book that I published, Stories of Love from Vikings to Tinder, is available for free online. It's an open access book. So if you search for that and you go to the website in Tyler and Francis, you can just download it. And the same is for this article called Enough with the Incels, a literary cry for help from female instincts, involuntary single. That is also open access. If you want to read any of this and immerse in it, you're more than welcome to. So with that article...
Yeah, I'll make sure to add those to the link description.
Cool, awesome. So the debate that triggered was very fierce and very predictable. People just got incredibly angry. That they interpreted, so I'm the worst. The worst encapsulation would be that I was a misogynistic fascist who wanted to make the government force women to breed with incels, and that's not the case. But yeah, in the beginning, it's a new problem. It's unique. It's very difficult to think around. We've heard for generations that overpopulation is the big problem. And can you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we've heard that overpopulation is the big problem. And suddenly, population collapse is what we have to worry about. It's just challenge to wrap your head around. So this is where Finland was 3 years ago. But now you've gotten in a position where you're starting to talk about what policies can you do, what experiments are can start solving this. I don't know if you can confirm this. Is it generally among Finnish people accepted that low fertility is a problem?
Well, the little bit of reading that I did about Finland, it did show that in the past 2 years, there has been a little bit more awareness about this topic. Yeah. And well, if I just take a look at my surroundings, of course, I don't know what is the general situation in Finland, but just paying attention to my surroundings, I see that a lot of the circles that we are around, people have at least, 2 to 3 children. My brother-in-law has 4. So he's doing his duty.
It's interesting. Also in those more family-oriented countries like Mexico or the Catholic countries, Spain, Italy, and those Mediterranean countries are abysmal. They're leading the way. They've been there for so long. So having this strong family, having had that traditionally strong family culture, it doesn't inoculate you against this. When I published an article the year before on low fertility, it created a huge storm on Twitter. Within 2 weeks, the article became one of the top 0.3 scientific publications ever in terms of public engagement, and that was almost exclusively because of Spanish-speaking Twitter. So it's like hundreds of Spanish speakers on Twitter discussed this article. It was pretty cool. So it seems that in people from a Catholic background, it makes more sense that high singledom, low family rates, and plummeting fertility is a bad thing. You have an intuition that, not children, not good. While in these Protestant countries, we're more like, we're not making children anymore. Well, that sounds relaxing,
okay.
And I bet it's really good for the environment. And
yeah.
So it's just, we've come so far in terms of becoming individualistic after these 800 years that we've become so short-term in our thoughts that thinking that, those children are a burden in so many ways. They cry, they want things, you have to look after them. It's a pretty big job. So we have seemed to have forgotten that if we don't make them, humanity ends. It's kind of individual freedoms are wonderful, but now we have to find a way to combine it with reproduction, or other cultures of the world will take over. And I love Africans and people in the Middle East. I have no problem with them at all. I just think it would be cool if we also had free women in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, there's a couple of bottlenecks that we have talked about in terms of what is preventing women to have more children. Another one that I've been thinking about is also, what are the economics play in these kinds of things? I mean, obviously, Norway is very well off in terms of how well people do. But in other countries, the reality is that for example, if I think back of my family in Mexico, so my mother had my grandparents had 14 kids.
Wow.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the next generation, my mother just had 2 kids. My aunts had between 2 and 3 kids. So one of the main differences is obviously education, a lot of factors, but one of the main ones is also the economics behind it. Whereas before, where one kid can eat, my grandmother would say, well, 11 can eat as well. But nowadays it seems that, things cost a little bit more now. Before, the father could sustain the whole family. Nowadays, you need both parents to sustain the whole family. So seeing perhaps having one kid is already a burden to some in terms of economics. Having another one could place them in a very difficult situation where maybe the quality of life could take a hit. So what are the policy from a government perspective that need to change in order for families to have better opportunity to reproduce?
Yeah. So the short answer is throwing money at it doesn't work. The long answer is that the economic factors are complex and super interesting. So the change from living in a rural environment to an urban environment is very important. On a farm, kids are free labor. In the city, they're really expensive and they cramp up your apartment. So if you want to look at why women now maybe want 3 children instead of 11, that's where you want to look. But the situation we're in now, or say in Norway, women still want 2.4 but only have 1.4, other factors are probably more important because they still want above replacement level reproduction. They're just not able to make it happen. So we have never been more prosperous than we are now. We're doing really well. Norway is incredibly rich. So that it's the economy that is hindering people from having children now compared to when we were dirt poor before the war or earlier times. It's more straightforward than what you would think from a rational Western perspective where people are beings who try to optimize outcomes. What happens when we're poor from an evolutionary perspective? In the evolutionary science, we have something called we have a life strategy theory. So if things are really bad, if you live in a very impoverished environment, your organism is incentivized to adopt a fast life strategy, which means to reproduce as quickly as possible because there might not be a tomorrow. So we invest less, we have a short-term perspective, zero-sum thinking, and teenage pregnancies just become very common. It does something with our head. So you would think, in an impoverished environment, you can't afford children, so you should have fewer. Well, not necessarily so. While if you're doing really well in a rich environment, you adopt what's called a slow life strategy, where you invest, you increase your expectations, you take your time, and that is what many women are doing. Things are so good that they can afford not to just hook up with the first low-value male who offers to be your boyfriend and then start reproducing with him. You set your heights higher. You say, well, maybe I don't need to start reproducing when I'm 19 or 24 or 29. Maybe I can wait into my 30s till my till my career is in place, till I find the right guy. And what happens for many women is that they either don't find a partner so that they can't start having children with, or they find him so late in life that the reproductive window is dramatically shortened. So maybe they want 3 children, they just have time to have 1. So economy can pull in both directions, of course. Real estate is getting really expensive. To get a big apartment, if you want to live centrally in Oslo, it's expensive. If you want 3 children, you need a bigger car. But several countries have started experimenting with throwing money at this to target, if you do that, if you commit to reproductive behaviors, we're going to give you a certain amount of monies. Those target transfers in those experiments that have been held had no effect. So there is another thing they're experimenting with where you just kind of like throw money more generally at people and see if that extra prosperity leads to more babies. And those have had an effect, but it's very expensive. One extra baby might cost $1 or $2 million in terms of, so it's just not effective. So what we're probably going to do in Norway now, we have a birth rate committee that is working now that will have their part report in April and then their final report next year. They're probably going to suggest $100 extra here, $1,000 extra there. They're going to try to sprinkle money on it, which is the social democratic way. This is what we've always done. And that's probably going to have no or very little effect, or it could even have a negative effect. So that's not going to work. So that traditional political tool chest that we're comfortable with, that has become rather empty. So social democracy was partially a result of low fertility. In the interwar years, in the 20s and 30s, we struggled with lower fertility. And back then, they decided to build houses, make it easier for the workers materially to have children. And then came also World War II, and that worked. Now we've gotten in a different position where extra money, at least used in the traditional way, is unlikely to have any effect at all, or if it has any effect, certainly not one that's going to be strong enough. So we have to think differently and make more drastic choices, and hope that those experiments we have over time can change our culture, because this is a question of culture, not of money, primarily. We need to, like I said earlier, I don't think all countries will go in this direction, but I think in a country like Norway and Finland, we need to ask ourselves, how can we build a society that is substantially different from this one, in which enough women will choose to have children because women with 3 children have better lives than single women. They need to not lose so many of those opportunities that they do today. And that will require significant cultural change. Women need to be empowered and gain access to more resources, and men need to be more marginalized, unfortunately, if we're going to go in that direction. You can't do it both. The empowerment of women requires a marginalization of low-value men. That's just a fact of it. I don't like it. I would love if there was something we could do to help men, because men are becoming more and more marginalized. But I don't see how we can solve the reproductive crisis and male marginalization without implementing a very dark Handmaid's Tale-like system. We'd have to go back to a time of patriarchy and female oppression that I don't think we have the cultural appetite for in Norway, and I certainly don't want to go in that direction. Norway has led the way feministically for 150 years. Maybe that will prove to have been a terrible idea, but this is where we are. Why not double down on it and sacrifice ourselves and see if we can use feminism even more strongly to take ourselves out of this situation? So at least one country or several countries tries that to see if we can combine having free women with reproduction. No human society in history has ever succeeded with it, but maybe there is a way, and if we can find out what the means are for that, maybe those means are also exportable to other countries and not something that would only work in the Nordic nations.
Perhaps. What sort of initiatives have been taken in place by the Norwegian birth rate committee?
Nothing. They started last year, and now they're doing a partial report in April. So they're just going to they're basically going to read the literature and tell us what the situation is, and then they're going to come probably with some mild suggestions on how we can drizzle a little bit of cash on couples. And then the government will do that. It's a nice step. It keeps this in the public attention. We're moving forward, and we're going to do small steps. We're not going to do big steps at first. That's not the Nordic way. We do things incrementally and pragmatically.
Mads, from an individual, what is our responsibility to prevent this from happening?
None, from an objective perspective. I mean, we have no responsibilities for anything. They're just consequences. If we don't reproduce, we disappear. And more than 99% of species that have ever lived did disappear. It's just, we are in a pretty cool situation now. If we keep our societies afloat, civilization going, we have the possibility to create what could become a human utopia, where humans, a world governed by AI and automation, where humans are freed to create wonderful lives for each other. We will probably be able to get off this planet and start living on other planets and expanding into space. As far as we know, we're the only intelligent life, or even life at all, in the universe. And from that perspective, you could say, well, if we're the only show in town in this vast, infinite universe, if we're the only life that can appreciate it, then I would say we have a tremendous responsibility for keep reproducing and keep furthering the human project and reach for the stars. And yeah, but you need some kind of position to say what responsibility we have as individuals. That's something that springs from culture. You could say that from a Norwegian culture, we have I would say we have probably the most feminist nation that ever existed. So I would say that female freedom is our most important value. And then from a Nordic and Norwegian perspective, we have a deep responsibility then, now that we have brought the world along with feminism and created these societies with free women, to continue on that path so we're able to have free women, but also exist. So you could say that's kind of a responsibility. We started this project. We can't stop halfway. Free women are great. Let's see if we can motivate these free women to reproduce so that they can exist also in the future. Because I mean, Scandinavia, we've been hanging around here for about 15,000 years. That we should just give up now. And I mean, that's the human project is millions of years. So if we're just gonna, our ancestors have faced bigger challenges than this. This is just, I mean, the 21st century reproductive crisis. That's not even the top 10. And if we're just going to be lazy and say, well, maybe it's good for the environment, let's just give up. Like Norway's biggest newspaper, they're one of their main commentators attacked me this summer and said that low fertility is not a problem. It's very disrespectful to women to talk about low fertility. And to the extent that it is a problem, the best thing we can do is to resign and relax. Don't think about it, just relax. And I mean, maybe, yeah, from an evolutionary point of view, maybe we have a certain responsibility to our ancestors, those who came before us, who for millions of years struggled through tremendous challenges and peril. And here we're sitting in these nice apartments and with swimming in money and food and privileges and luxuries and everything. And we're the ones that's going to stop reproducing. That's not too cool. I mean, we should hold ourselves to a higher standard than that. We should be able to agree that existence is a good thing and that we should work to create a world in which humans feel that reproduction have meaning and purpose to the extent that they're willing to commit to it.
Mads, has been an incredible conversation. What are you working on lately?
Yeah, so I've put together a group of top international evolutionary scholars, and we're applying for research funds to try to figure out what we might be able to do with this reproductive crisis. We want to investigate what are the actual factors that make people choose to have children or not. We want to look into and contribute to the debate around this. We want to look into the past to see what brought her here. Just create a lot of knowledge that policymakers can use for experimentation, and that it also can function as raw material for a cultural debate. Because the way we're going to change this is it's not going to be the politicians on top who's going to figure out clever solutions. That's good, but it's not enough. We need to involve as many people as possible to take this debate, so we can start this cultural process toward a new mating regime in which people do reproduce. So that's what we would like to do. So we've applied for Norwegian and European Research Fund, and we'd like to run this large project over several years, do longitudinal studies, and see what's actually going on here, what it would take to make people start having babies again.
I'm hopeful.
Thank you.
Mads, where can people keep up with you?
You can find my research on Google Scholar or ResearchGate. Go there and look at my name, search for my name. Then you'll see everything. A lot of it's available. Primarily, you said you were going to post a link to Stories of Love from Vikings to Tinder.
Yes.
That is a free book, so that's a good place to start. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for inviting me today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I really appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Take care.
All right, then. Bye, everybody.